Both of us, one of the reasons that we actually joined Masonry is we wanted to understand what was in the mind of the prophet Joseph Smith when he did this. Why was he involved? I'm just going to be honest and flat out. If you Mormons knew exactly what you had in the Book of Mormon, you'd have a very different world.
Hey guys, we're going to get to the video in just a second. Before we get into it, I just want to give you a little backstory. So link in the description, you can see a video we did a while ago. It's 5 hours long with Mike and Dave diving deep into Freemasonry and the temple. And we needed all those 5 hours to get all the knowledge that they shared with us. And we were surprised it got over 100,000 views. That many people wanted to know. So if you want a little bit more context going into this video, you can watch that first or you can watch it after, either way. But these guys reached out after watching that video and they're like, hey, we're Freemasons and we're Endowment temple goers. So we'd love to come talk about it. So Mike and Dave helped us out while Jackson and I are deployed. So we hope you enjoy this, share it with others. And without further ado, let's get to the video.
Welcome to Sick of Joseph. I'm Mike. Obviously, I'm not Hayden and Jackson. Y'all know Dave. We got a couple new guests on our show today. They're going to come and talk to us today about Masonry. We have Josh Flansburg and Robert Kaye.
Yes, sir.
And I met you, Josh. Basically, you reached out after we released that little, what was it, like a 5-minute episode on Freemasonry in the temple?
It was really quick.
It was a couple minutes.
I recall that, recording over 2 days.
Is that what it was? I thought just a few minutes. We released this episode on Freemasonry and the Temple Endowment. Link in the description. And after we released it, you reached out to me and said, hey, I'm a Master Mason. I have some things I'd love to share. Would you be willing to chat? And we went together and had lunch at the lunch place of Champions Del Taco.
Like men of sophistication that you are.
Yes, sophisticated gentlemen. And I think it was like a couple hours we chatted about some things. And after our discussion, I thought, would you be interested in coming out to the studio and talking about some of the connections and some of those things? And then Robert. I've never met Robert before.
So I forget. It was a friend in Kentucky, a new friend. A guy I did not know. A guy in Kentucky reached out to me and said, you should be talking to Rob Kaye of Mormon Yeshiva. And I think literally I texted, he gave me the number and I texted Rob and said, hi, I'm Dave. You don't know who I am. I think this is Rob Kaye of Mormon Yeshiva, and this guy in Kentucky said I should talk to you. And that must have been in February or March or something, right? So we've been more or less in touch since. Rob is Mormon Yeshiva and has been on various other podcasts. And sorry, do you want to kind of tell your own background a bit here?
Yeah. So I'm a basically Jewish convert to Masonry and Mormonism. There's no converts in Masonry, but in Mormonism. And what I try to do is to explore the Hebrew background of the Book of Mormon and to try to expose people to some of the things that oftentimes we read over that we don't realize are very ancient in the culture of Israel, in their language, their culture, and those type of things. So I try to explore that. Also, a Mason as well.
So you're wearing 3 hats. You remember the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Masonry, and
I wear a kippah too.
Yeah, and Judaism.
That's right.
That's interesting.
Well, and let me, Rob is I think underselling himself a little bit. When you say talk about the Hebrew Book of Mormon, people might think, like the Onomasticon or Chiasmus, and like that is yes, but actually it's more than that. It is about the prophetic sciences
in the Book of Mormon, from ancient Israel.
In the Book of Mormon.
Yeah,
prophetic traditions of prayer and things. So just a plug: if you have not spent any time in Mormon Yeshiva, I would suggest you check it out. It's excellent.
Yeah, it's a very different approach because I come from, in addition to a Masonic background, part of my family comes from 2 different ancient practices. One, Kabbalah. The other is Ma'aseh Merkavah, which is the workings of the chariot. So we have strong traditions in that. When I first read the Book of Mormon, I'm looking at this work going, who wrote this?
Okay.
Because this is distinctly Hebraic. But from traditions that mainstream Judaism is no longer really teaches. Now, you'll have rabbis that are definitely knowledgeable of it, but the traditions are very ancient and only preserved by very few sects now or traditions now.
Okay, so I'm just going to say this, having just met him, I got to say we got to do another segment just on that because this one's going to be on Masonry. But just listening to that sentence, I thought we could have an hour conversation just on that.
I have high hopes we can publish books by Rob at some point. Let me just for the benefit of those who may not be Hebrew speakers, just unpack one thing you said here. So Ma'aseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot. So Merkavah is the chariot.
The chariot.
And it appears in the Book of Chronicles in one verse as a name for the Ark of the Covenant, which elsewhere is the throne of God.
Yes.
And so you'll see that word Merkavah often in the phrase Merkavah mysticism or Merkavah mystics.
Yes.
Which is a reference to this one of the many traditions of Judaism that may be characterized as mystic, whether fairly or not, but that has to do with contemplation of and ascent in the temple.
Yeah. So many of the things you'll see actually a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Many
Between
of the things,
Merkavah mysticism and Freemasonry. Is that what you're talking about, the overlap? Okay.
You will see, because Masonry preserved a lot of the ancient truths in light of religious organizations, both Catholic, Protestant, whatnot, that were hunting people down and mass murdering them for the knowledge. They were destroying knowledge. So Masonry became a safe, like a fortress to try to preserve ancient knowledge so that it would not be destroyed. And that was one of the things. That's why I say there's a lot of overlapping things. People think, oh, this just originated with Masonry. Oh, no. The things in Masonry, albeit the institution is modern. When I say modern, I say comparatively modern.
Right.
Around
Like
900 AD.
define modern.
Give or take a little bit. But the elements of Masonry are much more ancient, even more ancient in some aspects than Israel itself.
Okay. Wow, that could be a whole other conversation.
That's super interesting. Like, do we want to start with that? I feel like you guys are driving. Do you want to start? Josh, where do you want to start the conversation? You want to talk about the history of Masonry or the nature? Tell us what's interesting.
Or I could pitch this question at you. When we did the episode, what was your first thought of, oh man, I want to talk about this? Like, what are you fired up to talk about with us today?
Fractals, right? So there's the dragon curve fractal, which is just made from, and I don't have a picture of the original fractal. Every iteration is just rotating at 90 degrees. You don't have to like math to be a Freemason, and this is getting pretty nerdy. This is my own artistic rendition of said fractal, the dragon curve fractal.
Okay, so for our audience, dumb that down. Explain what a dragon curve fractal is, because as soon as you said dragon, I'm thinking Joe Rogan. He believes in dragons now. I don't know if you know. If you're following social media, Joe Rogan is kind of our go-to dragon guy, but what are you talking about?
Well, when someone says dragon, I think of seraphim. But anyway,
okay.
But the fractal, it starts off as one line, then the next iteration is that first line copied on itself but rotated 90 degrees, and each iteration it just goes up. My own artistic rendition here is coupled with the Fibonacci curve over and over again. It's kind of my own creation. You don't see this in the original fractal, that it all kind of circles in on one spot. It has an axis mundi. It was after I changed it a little bit that it has its own axis mundi. There's layers upon layers. You can keep zooming in on one spot and you keep seeing the same thing, but in different contexts. The thing about Freemasonry, like with the temple, is that it's multivalent. It's fractal. You can zoom in and see the finer meanings, and you can zoom out and you can get the same meaning but bigger and applied differently. And so the answer to a question I might give you, or something that I say, it might have a bigger meaning, it might have a smaller meaning, might have some meaning that I can share with the general crowd, and it might have a meaning that is just for Masons only. In your first video about Freemasonry, you talked about how since you're endowed, you kind of have to talk with one arm behind your
back. Right. We can only talk about certain things.
Although it's a fairly small... Man, when I was a kid, like, you didn't say anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I think, so one of the things, I mean, I've said this in a recording or two, I'm not sure any of them have been released. I have become convinced that, for example, not a unique or exclusive example, I think that I have not said a single thing in social media in the last year that Hugh Nibley did not know and already say during his career. But the culture... Our idea of sacred reticence was so broad, and I think we threw a lot of things in there that were arguably inappropriate, and included not just sort of the entire temple experience, but also, for example, the divine feminine. You don't talk about that, right? Mm-hmm. That he would say things. In a kind of a code. Actually, there's a quote in a speech from Brigham Young recorded in the Journal of Wilford Woodruff where Young says, I could talk about Freemasonry all day and you wouldn't know it unless you were also a Freemason. I think Nibley talked about the temple in the same fashion. He gave a speech in the 70s in the Smith Field House, which is published as an essay in Temple and Cosmos, where ostensibly he's talking about recent discoveries in the Apocrypha, things that have come out in texts in the mid-20th century. And he compares those to images and ideas of the Book of Mormon, but then also the headings of each section of the speech, the headings are taken out of the Sermon on the Mount, right? So, like, I think he knew a lot more than he said openly because we had this very strong idea about you couldn't say anything. And I think that has changed. I think we have rethought that. And with respect to the endowment, the idea is fairly restricted. There's a small number of things you shouldn't be talking about. And the point isn't really that they're secret because anything's on the internet because somebody is going to go try and make money as an influencer by publishing her endowment and whatever. The idea of sacred reticence is there are some things that I have, a limited number of things that I have committed to not saying, right? And so, yeah, I guess all I'm saying is yes, but also one hand tied behind my back is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. I think we can say more than we sometimes think we can.
That makes sense.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I was going to get to the point where I have to have both hands behind my back because I'm double obligated here.
Oh.
But
Okay.
if hands behind the back are is too strong, then I got two pinkies behind my back.
Yeah.
We'll go with that. Interestingly enough, recently, the same kind of sentiment of kind of getting more comfortable sharing what we can share about is also something that's kind of moving into Freemasonry. In fact, since we do the Mike and Dave do books, I have one about Freemasonry for you. Freemasonry for Dummies. Okay. As silly as it may seem, it's written by a 33-degree Mason. He's a past master, Knight Templar. He knows his stuff, and he knows it really well, and he references other like professional historian Masons in this. Everything that we can talk about, he does talk about in here.
Do you have something interesting from that book that when we did the video on Freemasonry that you thought, oh, they missed this part, we should talk about this?
In order to get prepared for that, I rewatched the whole thing with this right next to me and I showed you my notes. I did a play-by-play everything that we could talk about. The biggest thing that comes to my mind right this second is the connection between the Knights Templar and Freemasonry.
Okay.
Interesting. I'd love to talk about what's
the connection?
Well, to the point that Rob was making, like where do we think Freemasonry came from? And there's probably multiple answers, right? It's probably lots of pieces.
So it helps to understand the elements of Masonry. For example, there is operative Masonry. Operative Masonry is your nuts and bolts. That is the degree work. That is the officers of a lodge. Those are the mechanics. Those are some things we can talk about. And that's why I say when we talk about the elements of the temple, in all reality, the elements that Masons can't discuss are almost the same elements that Mormons can't discuss.
Interesting.
Which would be, again, your signs, your tokens, your penalties, your obligations, those things with which both sides are both very familiar with. So we can steer clear of that. But the legend and lore and symbolism,
the backstory,
is completely, it's a free-for-all.
Totally.
Now, that gives us a lot of room you'll see the overlap, you'll see the interwoven history, and by looking at that, you can see, okay, what was in the mind of the prophet Joseph? I know we were talking about this. I think it was interesting, both of us, one of the reasons that we actually joined Masonry was we wanted to understand what was in the mind of the prophet Joseph Smith when he did this. Why was he involved?
So after Josh answers the question, because I know he's ready, will you talk about that? Sure. Will you talk about, Rob Kaye, think this is how I see Joseph's mindset when he's introduced to these ideas? Because I want to put a pin in that, but I want to have that conversation. Okay, go.
Right. The connection between Masons and the Templar, it's not likely.
Okay. There's a lot of people that say it's dubious, right?
Right. Very dubious. In fact, I think there's pretty much consensus at this point, even among like professional Mason historians, that the connection isn't there. But it's cool, and we're keeping it. In the York Rite, the lore of the Knights Templar, that's not going anywhere. We've adopted it. It's ours now. Although it seems more likely that just in general, the framework for making a promise or signing a contract was just very similar. It's either in the Freemasonry for Dummies or that, where he talks about a traveling Mason getting into, going and visiting an Eastern Orthodox church and his mind being blown because he's like, oh, wait a minute.
Right.
This seems very familiar. And writing back to his friends, he's like, I think I know where we came from.
So culture was a big influencer in how they made contracts and agreements and had brotherhoods and guilds, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
And I mean, even person to person, I mean, there's, don't want to get you in trouble by mentioning Disney titles out loud, but there's a movie about an old guy who floats his house away on balloons.
You can't copyright a title.
Oh, you can't copyright it. It's up. But like when he meets his wife at the very beginning when they're little kids, she tells them to, cross your heart, cross, and he raises, and cross. That's a sign and a penalty right there. It's stuck around and it's everywhere. And when you train your eyes to see it, it's all over the place.
But now, do you think, so that's an interesting example, do you think that's accidental, or do you think that there's a Mason who's animating in Disney who is deliberately raising his hand to his fellows?
I'll never tell.
Because I would be that guy. That is exactly the kind of thing I would do.
Just put it in there.
Yeah. I am not a Mason, but that is exactly the kind of thing I would do as a published novelist.
I do think that it's probably more likely that the situation is that it was just so widespread and Masonry was just a part of it.
Yeah.
That we're just seeing the echoes of the old social norm everywhere.
Yeah, I like that idea of we live in this vast thing called culture where there's bits and pieces everywhere from the old remnants, and then we have the new stuff and we're mixing it in. And whether it's Disney or whether it's the temple or whether it's Freemasonry or the myths of Homer, all of these stories have elements that are there's a lot of similarity between these things. I'm a big fan when I teach young people to prepare them for the temple. I tell them the story of the hero's journey and how the hero has to leave home and battle the serpent and overcome horrible difficult obstacles, and they get some help from heaven, and then they ascend, and then I show them some of that stuff happening in the story of the Bible, and then I say, this is the story of the temple. The backdrop to the temple is we've left home. We're strangers in a foreign place. This is not our country. I think, doesn't Paul say something like, we're strangers and pilgrims in this foreign land, and we're going to our heavenly home, and the temple is a liturgical reminder. It's a bunch of rites and symbols that are put together in a short, concentrated form to remind us, where do we come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? How do I get there? How do I relate with each other? Just to put it into like a 30-second explanation. So when you went into Masonry, partially to say to yourself, okay, Rob, what's going on in the mind of Joseph? And then I said, we want to talk about that. What have you come up with over your course of study?
Well, first off, it helps to understand that the history of America is a Masonic history.
Yes.
I mean, look at Washington, D.C., for example. The entire city laid out according to Masonic principles, even the laying of cornerstones, those type of things. The astronomical layout of the White House compared to the Washington Monument, basically aligning itself with Virgo, the star spike and the constellation Virgo, didn't happen by accident. These are men who were studied, knowledgeable in principles of Masonry, astronomy, grammar, math, those type of things. All these sciences that Masonry preserved from being destroyed over the centuries. So when we see that, that's the backdrop of America at the time of Joseph Smith.
Right.
I mean, you have the Morgan Affair, which is something, if you understand about that or not, it was a situation where somebody went and took some things very ultra literally, committed some acts that probably wasn't the wisest things to do, and definitely detrimental, and has left a bad flavor in a lot of people's mouths.
Yeah.
At the same time, now you also have ultra-conservative religious organizations of its time, Catholicism, some Protestantism, other elements, that they hated Masonry. They wanted to destroy it. That's why, for example, there were elements in the Catholic Church that hunted down and tried to destroy the Templars. There were the same elements that hunted down and tried to destroy the Kabbalistic Jews, torturing these people to do one of two things: to either reveal the secrets or to wipe them out so that no one else would ever have it. Entire schools of people. I mean, it wasn't just the Masons that got it. It was other groups as well. And so under that umbrella of Masonry, you began to see, in my opinion, you begin to see a protective, like a veil or protective area where these things could be preserved for future generations. Now, when I see Joseph Smith, obviously in his time frame, he's going to be, exposed to elements of Masonry. Now, how much of that is always up for debate.
Right.
But the interesting thing is, he obviously saw an order of priesthood and Masonry, which I will give you a nice quote from their own time frame. And this one's from Heber C. Kimball. This is a letter that he wrote to Parley P. Pratt, and it was in, if you want to know the reference, Heber C. Kimball to Parley P. Pratt, June 17th, 1842. Okay. There is a similarity of priesthood and Masonry. Brother Joseph says Masonry was taken from priesthood, but has become degenerated. But many things are perfect. Now, if we understand the nature of restoration is not a new build. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. People, one thing I've noticed with a lot of friends of mine, so many who've left the church, others who they think Masonry basically sprout horns on Thursday nights. But the reality is, when you sit around and you look at the history and you look at the elements of Masonry, you begin to realize there's a lot more going on here. But a restoration does not happen in a vacuum. Joseph just doesn't go to God and say, give, oh give, says the little stream. He doesn't say give. It's the idea of he's asking questions. He's being exposed, probably led to being exposed, probably even beyond his own knowledge. Something is leading him to be exposed to varying elements. And then he begins to ask questions, which is even in Judaism, a law of heaven. You don't get unless you ask. I have no right or duty to give to you unless you ask. That's why the Book of Mormon says, it's given to many to know the mysteries of godliness, but they're laid under a strict command only to impart that portion given to the children of men. Now, why? Same rule goes, strangely enough, for Kabbalah, the Maaseh Merkavah, those traditions. I can talk about them in general, but I don't go out there advertising because it's not wise.
It's an interesting question. There's a couple times in the Book of Mormon where individuals who are visionaries are asked this question: what do you want? I think one of the questions exactly is read something like, what desirest thou? Yep. And how many people go through life and they never know what they want? They don't ever figure it out. And I think that's what you're hitting on is, do you know what you want? And if you do, are you willing to ask and put in work to find out? Yeah. Right?
I have friends. You've had them on here before. They'll ask me questions, and I say, like my friend Todd, I say, Todd, what is it that you want?
Right.
Because I'm not going to answer you and until you tell me what it is you want, so I know how to answer you. Because if you just want me to, he'll call me up sometimes. We're good buds, and blow my mind today. And I'm like, not happening, dude. I'm too busy.
Yeah.
But if you tell me what you want.
But you might be answering a question that they're not prepared to ask. They don't even know. Yeah. And so you're talking on a different level and they're not ready for it. But if they come to you and say, okay, Rob, what was in Joseph's mind? What did Masonry do for him? Mm-hmm. And where was his head when these things were introduced? Clearly you've thought this through. So
exactly. So from my perspective, in my opinion, what I think Joseph Smith saw when he says an order of priesthood and Masonry are those elements that Masonry preserved, and then he began to put them together in a restored fashion.
Okay.
Now, people understand that in Masonry, people think there's some type of competition between the degrees of Masonry and the endowment itself, never knowing that these things were given concurrently up to the very same day in Nauvoo. They stopped. The Blue Lodge degrees and the Masonic and the endowment were both given concurrently in different areas, different buildings, but to the same day. So one's not replacing the other, but I do believe one is a school for the other. In other words, to prepare the people for what was to come.
Okay.
This will give you enough of the elements, the symbolism, the education that he's trying to communicate it. Because in all reality, one of the major common themes of Masonry and Mormonism is the path of the initiate.
Okay.
In Masonry, you have Enoch. You have Hiram Abiff. In the Book of Mormon, you have Nephi, you have all of these different characters.
Brother Jared makes an ascent, right? He comes to the veil.
Exactly. And so all of the, you'll see common symbolism, common themes. So if I know that they may have a common source, if I can get to the source, I then can begin to unlock what we're looking at now.
So if I'm hearing you right, one of the things you're saying, Rob, is that Freemasonry did prepare the church to understand the endowment, to even be ready for it, which I think you talked about that when we did our short 5-minute video on Freemasonry, where you said, where else are they going to get this preparatory education? They're not getting it from Protestantism at the time. Is that fair to say?
That's right. Yeah. It didn't exist in Protestantism. Many of the books didn't even exist or available to people. I mean, like, for example, I was even telling Dave, we were talking about the Sefer Yetzirah and the Sefer Bahir.
Okay, that's going to go over everybody's head. So as soon as you say that, now you got to explain it. Yeah.
So, very old Jewish mystical text.
Yes.
Now,
there we go.
Both we all consider sealed books, just like the Zohar is considered a sealed record.
Okay.
Okay. You have one sealed record in the Book of Mormon, but people don't often understand what sealed means. It has a very, strangely enough, a Masonic definition. Sealed doesn't mean that they're necessarily lock and key, where I cannot physically access it. It means it's most likely concealed in front of your own eyes.
Could we all agree that there's some sealed stuff in the Book of Mormon that's right in front of our face? It's written in English.
Increasingly, I think that's what it's all.
Yeah. And we have to read it with eyes that can crack the seal. Was it? Have you ever talked about that before, Dave?
Yes.
Well,
yes, a lot.
So, like, I was reading the Come Follow Me. I'm trying to keep up with it, but like, the brother of Jared, after he's seen everything and commanded to write it down, God's saying to him, I will cause you to write it in a language that no one will be able to read. He's telling him, hey, we're going to encode this for you. Yeah, right there, we're enciphering it.
Yes. There are lots of little indications, man. Phrases like, our language cannot describe. And I think, really? Your language cannot actually describe? Or does that mean something else? Like, my language does not permit, my restrictions do not permit me to do this, or my code language does not contain a way to communicate this to you, right?
Because you're not ready.
The Book of Mormon's full of little indications of that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I 3 questions or reactions. One, I would be interested in knowing, so, I mean, I think the mythology of the temple, at least as the Book of Mormon knows it, is the expulsion from and the return to Eden. Mm-hmm. I would love to, and I think it's in the Book of Mormon all over the place. I don't think that's secret at all. I would love to know what the mythology is of the Masonic rites, to the extent we could. I'd be interested in hearing that. But 2 other reactions. Some institutions in power have and still have an animus against Masonry. Mm-hmm. I think especially sort of monarchical and this is a broad brush, but like Catholicism, in my experience, a lot of sort of Catholic friends will sort of view Masonry negatively. And it's interesting. You could see easily how the existence of a brotherhood that was designed for self-protection and preserving secrets could either be seen as an agent for fomenting revolution, or could in fact become one. Sure. Right? If you already have a vessel that we keep secrets, we have recognition signs, that kind of stuff, right? And you got strong Republican sentiment into that, right, in 18th century France or something. Mm-hmm. Here's the question though. You mentioned astronomy, which I think is interesting because I think there's a reason to believe that's the oldest human science, and that it's very old. That it's Hamlet's Mill, Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Deckend argue that it is that when writing first shows up, what we get is people writing stories that encode astronomical lore, which would have required many centuries of observation to have mastered. Yes. Right, things like the precession of the equinoxes, or the cycles of Venus, or right, the Sothic cycle, or whatever. Which, I mean, the image, the suggestion there is that for tens of thousands of years back during the Ice Ages, humans are doing whatever they're doing. Maybe they're building big cities in the Rishat structure in North Africa. Maybe they're wandering around killing lions with their bare hands. I don't know what they're doing. But at nights they're looking at the sky and they're passing on observations. Do you think? No, may I don't want to ask a yes/no question. How old do you think the roots of Masonry go back? I mean, if we really so they're not the Knights Templar, right? I get that, and I hear you saying maybe it's people signing agreements, but like, do you think that some of this stuff is potentially been preserved for maybe under different kinds of names and different shapes of organization for like a long time?
It is my personal opinion that it's always been the priesthood holders. That, like, you know, after the order of the Son of God. I think that we're just seeing I can see why people think that, you know, the claim that Masonry went all the way back to Egypt. Well, yeah, we have the same symbols, you know, like some of the same symbols. It's just right there for everybody to see. It's easy to make that claim that Masonry goes back that far. You know, Masonry is a new, relatively in the history of humanity, it's a relatively new organization. But what is as ancient as the foundation of the world itself is the priesthood. And I think that, you know, the symbols in the priesthood, well, the symbols in the temples in Egypt are probably there because, you know, when Joseph went there, he took them with him if they didn't already have them themselves. And so...
and when you say Joseph, you mean Joseph of Egypt,
yeah.
right?
Sorry, my bad.
No, I always think, okay, how is this being heard? And so, yeah, Joseph of Egypt.
Yeah, Joseph of Egypt. And, you know, and then you kind of got to get into the mindset of asking yourself, well, you also see some of these symbols in even further Eastern traditions. One of the Asian traditions, there's the male and the female spirit that started humanity. One of them's holding a square, the other's holding a compass.
I think we had that in our presentation, right? That and Nibley has that in his book as well. So yeah. So what do you see in that that you can talk about? What do you see in that image?
Well, I mean, in the image, I think it's like LDS mind is saying, oh, okay, that's probably a callback to Adam and Eve in some form or another. Masonic mind hyper-focuses on the square and the compass.
Right.
Which...
can you talk about that? Can you talk about why they focus on that? What can you say about that?
Like, I mean, I brought my square and my compass right here. So in addition to being a Mason, like, professionally, I'm a machinist. And before the days of CNC computers... you do your layout with a square, a compass, a straight edge. And so I've actually, in an educational, I worked mostly with CNC stuff, but in my educational capacity, I did use these. And so, interestingly, I mean, they're symbols. And like I said with the fractal earlier, it's multivalent. It has multiple meanings, and like I said, I can only talk about so much, but there are some things that I can show you the symbols and I can let you make up your own mind.
Okay.
And then there are some things that I can show you and I can definitely share it with you about.
Okay, so now we're talking about what does this mean?
Yeah. So, like, we use the example of the saints John the Beloved and John the Baptist. And...
You talk about when you say we, Masons.
Yeah, Masons.
Use those examples. Okay.
Yeah, and so we're supposed
Mormons have also heard of them.
Yeah.
I think maybe, yeah.
So, like, the idea is they represent two lines and the circle in the middle kind of butts up against those. The idea with that is if we're listening to both of these guys' examples and and then the other one is the scriptures. So if we're kind of following these examples and listening to the scriptures, keeping our, subduing our passions within the bounds that God has scribed out for us, then it's at that point, you know, we're doing good morally. And then in the temple, you know, for us, all things can be circumscribed into one great whole. But
Are you saying that's a Masonic teaching? Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear.
right, I might be switching too fast back and forth.
Well, I'm going to help decode. That's my job. I'm playing Hayden and Jackson's role.
It's one of those things when he's talking about, like, you're a machinist, so you're using these practical hands-on tools.
Right.
And he has a knowledge and understanding of how to use that within his profession. Same thing with a mason, whether it be a stonemason, carpenter. Now, in my background, which is more mathematics, and I take, but I took geometry. Basic geometry uses these basic tools. But the question is why? Is it just for design? Partly. But it's also for the fact that geometry changes the brain. It changes how we think.
Okay.
In other words, instead of thinking things from just a one-dimensional or even a two-dimensional, what geometry allows us to do is allows us to begin to look at things from a multi-dimensional.
Yes.
Now, which one is true? Well, they all are.
Yeah.
It just depends on what you're looking at. That applies to our approach of the stars,
The temple.
the scriptures.
The 5-dimensional sephirotic tree.
There you go. I mean, star tetrahedron, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. Metatron's cube, the whole. I mean, we could go on
Yes,
and on.
Metatron's cube, brothers and sisters.
This is interesting to me. One of the things I have thought about the square and the compass. I guess I'm going to just say this so you can shoot me down or whatever. The interesting thing about them is that fundamentally they are the same shape. But the different use of the shape determines whether you're making a circle or a square, right? And so it strikes me that, the Chinese image we're talking about is Chinese, right? Liu Qian and whatever it is.
I can't read it, but yeah.
I think that's a female and a male sort of serpentine deity, and they're intertwined, and one's holding the square and compass.
Yep.
So it strikes me as being an expression of the fundamental unity of a humanity that is sexually dimorphic, right? Male and female are different, except that we're fundamentally not. Fundamentally, we're the same. And maybe, sort of, Josh, to your fractal point, maybe there are other analogous, maybe that same idea could be applied at different levels of vision in the universe.
Absolutely. It's so multivalent. Like, we can pick one symbol and we can beat it to death for hours and still have more to talk about.
That's what we do here.
Yeah, that's why I like watching it. But yeah,
That's what we do here.
when we back to the compass. I'm not going to say it out loud, but think, those of you who are listening who are endowed, or next time you go to the temple, think about what they're saying when they're talking about the marks and what it means. And then remember that, like, this is a layout tool, that God has provided certain bounds for us to keep ourselves in.
There's a good line in Masonry, and I read it, and it's in a couple of different books, and I'm going to butcher it, and you're going to correct it. But it's something about Masonry takes good men and wants to make them better. And I think David O. McKay talked about the gospel of Jesus Christ takes bad men and wants to make them better, and good men and make them better. In other words, wherever you are in life, you can improve. If you woke up today and you're thinking, man, why did I sleep into 10 and I missed my workout, and why did I waste all this time? The invitation of Masonry and the temple, Latter-day Saint faith, all Christianity is, we can do better, and let's try harder, and let's set a goal and improve, right? And did we get that even close to the way they say it in Masonry?
Yeah, pretty much dead on.
Okay.
For example, when you bring up the geometric tools or the working tools of a Mason, we call God, or Creator, what do we call him, the grand architect of the universe. So you already have an architect who has designed even the heavens above. So these basic symbols or tools, they work on a micro level in you, they work on a earthly level, and a celestial level. So this is why you see in many of the ancient, like, pyramid structures, pyramid complexes, this goes back to an Enochian, one of the 7 laws of Enoch, sometimes called Thoth, the idea of as above, so below.
Okay.
In other words, why are these cities, even Washington, D.C., and other cities which were considered New Jerusalems, there's been more than one, 2 actually in Europe themselves, besides Jerusalem itself, they're laid out according to and in accordance with celestial bodies. It's not by accident.
Right.
I mean, if you want to find out where your pyramids are, and where they would have been started, like, for example, even whether it be the Great Pyramid or even the Pyramid Complex in Mexico, and you will begin to see that they laid out their cities according to patterns of the
It
constellation.
wasn't just random.
It wasn't random.
Yeah.
And you have to have science to do that. Science, which, in my opinion, Masonry has preserved the knowledge of that. It didn't invent it, but it preserved it.
Okay.
In a time when men would have destroyed it for power.
And I'll talk more on that too. But
So this is interesting. Your mention of Thoth is interesting. I've been reading, it's not a biography, a book about Giordano Bruno, who was a Dominican monk who was burned at the stake for heresy because arguably from the Catholic point of view correctly, the biographer thinks because he was he took the Hermetic texts seriously as a religion and saw himself as sort of a missionary or a prophet of a Hermetic faith. Thought he was getting a positive reception in Elizabethan England, and then he was getting a positive reception in France, and so he went to Italy, and they said, yeah, no, and put him in jail and then burned him. Your mention of Thoth is interesting. Like, do you see, because the Hermetic stuff flowers in the Middle Ages and then kind of goes quiet, but it's like about the sort of time the Freemasons sort of shows up in their writing just a few decades after that. Like do you think about, do you see like a genealogy of, do you think, listen, where did this come from? Yeah, probably there were literally Merkava, people who meditated upon, prayed the name of God and, and meditated upon the chariot. And some of their knowledge kind of came down and like, are the Hermetics sort of, whether they were right or wrong is almost not the point, right? There are ideas they were passing down that came down to Masonry. Do you see a kind of a genealogy like that?
My point of view is that the original Adam and Eve civilization, which in Judaism we don't see just Adam and Eve as a singular people. That's one certainly interpretation.
Yeah.
But
what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, Adam and Eve being a civilization, Cain and Abel being separate civilizations, one overcomes the other. So each of the patriarchs, in addition to being an actual singular person, is also representative of the civilization that had both a rise or fall.
Okay.
So we have a successive line of civilization through Seth that preserves light and truth till you get to Enoch, another civilization. Abraham, a civilization. So we are reading a child's story in the scriptures.
I've heard that before.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why even our rabbis say anybody who takes this as an ultra literal story is a fool. And the reason they say it that way is because they understand that it's not that the stories are foolish. It's that the fact that our understanding and approach to them is like a fool. We hyper focus in on elements. Did Adam have a belly button? Oh my gosh. When somebody actually asked me that one time, I go, seriously? This is what you think about? But the idea is, and see, here's what I like about the idea of Freemasonry. So as you proceed through the degrees of Masonry, the lore does change. The legend changes a little. The more, when you get into aspects describing the ancient order of things, you get into a narrative about Enoch. You also get into narratives about Israel and Babylonian captivity. Now,
and are these stories told verbatim, or is it a general thing, or is it a presentation that they try to keep within specific language?
Well, ideally they're verbatim. Now, I will tell you, this is the thing we really have to get out about Masonry. There is no singular Masonry, despite what we want to think.
Okay.
There is no one Masonry around the universe. I mean, in a sense, in the world. The reason I say that is because there's the institution of Masonry, which makes guidelines. It standardizes things so that if I go to his lodge and he comes to mine, we're going to be talking the same language. However, if I were to go to a lodge in Germany, it would be very different.
Okay.
If I go to a lodge in Egypt, in fact, I had the opportunity to talk to an Islamic Mason. Very interesting. What do we share in common? The first 3 degrees. But after that, their take on things, I was dumbfounded. I was like, wow, Aboud. Okay. I mean, seriously. I mean, I sat down with him, and then you realize that if everything came from a master civilization, and branches filtered down after that civilization began to fall, and things began to be scattered around areas of the world, you're going to have branches of truth from that original. And honestly, if you actually look at the parable of Xenos in the Book of Mormon, in Mormonism, we have a very narrow interpretation. In Judaism, that's a song. And what's interesting about the song is how it's meant to be recited. And what this recitation is meant to do is to tell us, okay,
The parable of Xenos is a song?
it's a song.
And so we're referring to Jacob 5.
Yes.
So in Judaism, they have this parable, I'm hearing you
they don't
say.
have it's the banner of the parable itself.
Okay.
You can tell it's a song. So, like, for example, when they would say stuff, and he dug it, and he dunged it, and he did this, that's a song.
Okay.
It's the patterns of repetition and numbers within the Book of Mormon will tell you when you're actually reading a song or not.
So in your mind, Jacob 5 is this beautiful song.
Yes.
That should be sung, set to music.
With a cantor as well as a choir, if you will, a chorus that repeats. Now, why? Because it's meant to communicate this aspect of there was once an old tree, an ancient civilization.
Okay.
The tree is a symbol of the civilization. Okay, it died. To save the tree, what did he do? He took branches and he scattered them all over the world.
Yeah.
Okay, all these branches have truth, and they did at one time bring forth fruit.
Yes.
But now a long time's passed, and an enemy came among us. Something happened, and things became corrupted. Now we're at a different juncture. Now we're gathering those branches and trying to bring them back into the tree, the original civilization, or even the person that symbolizes Christ.
Okay.
He is that idea of that branch, that root. that
Right.
stem.
Multiple ways to see the tree, I'm hearing you say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you get this, you'll say, this is the restoration of the house of Israel. However, from both the Masonic as well as a Kabbalistic point of view, when he says, I will unfold this mystery to you, when you hear that word unfold,
Right.
you know that you're reading something that's very Kabbalistic. And how you read it is important. Same thing, this multidimensional aspect of Masonry.
We'll come back to the square. I talked about the compass, but we'll come back to that square in just a moment because I want to stay on topic where we're at.
Okay, yeah.
So, because as far as songs, ciphers, all of this stuff, it also kind of butts up against the memorization devices. So, because a lot of this it's very important. It's all memorized. And for some reason, people can memorize poetry and songs better than they can just normal written out text.
I know Jenny's phone number, and it's been, 50 years?
Right?
And why do I know that? It's in my head. I know her phone number.
It's the same reason why I still know the jingle for goldfish crackers. So,
you knew the number too.
so one of the cool things about the Freemasonry for Dummies is in the back of it, there's an English translation of the oldest, it's the Regius manuscript. It's the oldest document in Freemasonry. Okay. I don't know if the cameras can see it, but it's metered out like a poem because it is. It is a poem. It's the poem of moral duties. And it kind of outlined what the earliest known, the oldest recorded on paper Freemasons were doing.
Wait, now, Regis manuscript dated to about what time, Josh?
It's right here at the beginning. Give me 1 second. The Regius manuscript was written in AD 1390.
1390. Okay, so it's old. Or,
So
I mean,
that's
relatively old, right?
So where do we find it? Like, how do we know that? I'm curious.
It was, I think, originally written in Old English. The original document is written in Old English. So
Okay.
I don't know where they found it. I'd have to refresh my mind on that.
Wow.
But-
So if it's actually Old English as opposed to Middle English, then we're saying the document is 1390, but then the text must be older than that.
The ideas
People have
predate
stopped. The ideas predate the manuscript, and people stopped speaking Old English when the Normans took over in the 11th century. Mm-hmm. So that would make this quite old if it's Old English.
Well, one of the nice things about this contains a brief history of Freemasonry as we know it. And King Athelstan, the first official...
That is definitely an Old English speaker, Athelstan.
Yeah. He was the first official king of the English, and if I'm getting the name right. But he is associated as, in some circles, as one of the kind of people to kind of gather in Freemasons. I wouldn't call him a patriarch of Freemasonry.
You could now. He's pretty old.
But so there was a big congregation of Freemason. It's my understanding that they went all over Europe, but Athelstan liked collecting them because he had a lot of things he wanted to build. And so, they really did set up shop in England and Scotland. And so that's where the oldest document that we have about Freemasons. And, you know, I would read some of this, but, you know, some things about Freemasonry, if you want to read it, go find it yourself. Okay.
Would you like me to read a passage? Is that possible?
Do you mean the Regius manuscript? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the Regius manuscript.
Okay.
There's some work that you need to do for some information.
And once again, explain what it is. What is the Regius manuscript?
So, like, the Regius manuscript was like the rule book.
Okay.
Like, it was the rule book for Masons back then, and it was, in fact, a lot of modern lodges still use concepts from the Regius manuscript to kind of formulate their charters. Some things are tweaked a little bit for, like, modernity's sake, and then also most Masons these days are speculative Masons and not operative Masons, and Regius manuscript was entirely operative at this point.
But even in that, you begin to see how our language has evolved, or maybe de-evolved over time.
Depends on how you view it, right?
From then till now, look at even the way Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon compared to the way we talk now.
Right.
Many of the things, our definitions change. We may say the same words, same thing. You'll also see in the Regius manuscript almost a poetic beauty if you go through it. It's almost like it's a way to commit things to memory so that even a child could do it. It's like even how I was taught Hebrew as a kid. Okay, you A B C D E F G Aleph Bet Then Gimel Dalet He and Vav and Dayin. You know, you're going through these things and you use music.
Right.
Most of the scriptures were based in music. They're meant to be sung. Why? So that you remember them. Once you remember them, it changes your brain.
You know, working with young people, a lot of times we do this thing called doctrinal mastery, where we have certain scriptures we have to work on, and we used to have to memorize them. When I was in seminary, we had to do 40 each year. And I remember, I've been doing this a long time, working with kids and memorizing scriptures. Several of them have a rhythm. Da-da, 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 and just a rhythm. And there's certain things in the temple, in my mind, they're just rhythmic and they just flow, and I can just quote them in my head as you go along, and you think that this was a device, could be, to help them to remember it. Because I heard you mention that these things were to be remembered, and there had to be a way to tie it to memory, and maybe music was part of it, maybe rhythm, or the way the words were put together.
And catechism.
Yes.
Okay. So catechism is also a memory device. So catechism, as I understand it, it's question, answer. So the person who's questioning, the question spurs the next answer. And so you don't have to commit like a big long stream of words into an unending unending block of memory.
Like a monologue, but you have to know your part.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have to know your part, and we riff off each other. By the way, this is my favorite way to talk about scripture. Rather than me just regurgitate for an hour, I like the back and forth, because then it's conversational and it's participatory.
Right.
Well, and it's meant to be.
Right. And so this is one of the cool things about the Book of Mormon. Now, there's a lot of back and forth conversations that happen in the Book of Mormon. But then when you start to pair it with other important tells, right? Like maybe there's an angel showing you a really cool looking tree, but it's in the form of question and answer.
What do you want? I want to know what it is. Shows them something. What is that? It's this. Do you want to know more?
Which is distinctly Hebraic.
It is.
How we, as Israelites or Jews, approach the scriptures is very different. You have your linear reading, but the actual way you're meant to experience the scriptures or to know them is to experience them. You are to become the character. So, like, for example, when I'm reading a story of, Adam and Eve, sound familiar? I'm to become the character. When I read a story of Abraham, I'm to become Abraham. When I read a story of Nephi, that's me. That's you. You're meant to take a character's role and experience it, even if it's only on the stage of your mind, which you'll also see again, like we saw about in Masonry. We have degrees. There are many ways. They're almost like stage plays. Why? Because you're going to become that character so you can have a vicarious experience and absorb the information you're meant to be taught.
And like the thing is so Freemasons have catechisms. After each degree, we're supposed to go through a catechism that shows that we remember stuff. And it's in cipher. So here's
Explain what cipher is, yeah.
So this is my catechism book. I'm going to keep it closed. There is...
Or we would all burn like Indiana Jones.
Don't look at it, Marion.
Absolutely. You absolutely would. The whole thing is in a cipher. I can read it fluently. You can read it fluently because you're Grand Lodge of Utah too.
I wouldn't even know what I was looking at.
But you know what? You have a cipher. You just don't know it. Most Mormons have a cipher, and they never knew what they had. That's just the funny thing. It takes that knowledge of Masonry to understand what Joseph Smith was restoring.
Yeah.
So it's in a cipher, and it's in the form of a catechism to help us.
Would the cipher be the first letter of every word they need to know? So in Scripture Mastery, a lot of times I'll do that. I'll have the verse, we'll teach it to them, and then I'll slowly pull away the words until it's the first letter.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're talking about in your cipher book.
Yeah.
Just to paint a picture for the mind's eye of our audience that can't see the cipher book.
So, like, for example, we talk about ciphers in Masonry. They're meant, among other things, to help us communicate and help us to remember things. In Hebrew, we have the Becher, which is is a ciphered language in Hebrew which comes out of Egypt. Masonry also has it. It comes in a later degree. They've preserved that lore. It's a ciphered language. They preserve it using geometric terms, but it actually is the exact same cipher used in ancient Israel. You had it too. You just didn't know you had it. See, when people talk about Joseph Smith's Egyptian alphabet, they look at this like, well, he just must have made this all up. And I'm looking at it going, no. He's using a derivation between the Royal Arch cipher and the Hebrew cipher, which goes back to Egypt. There's where your language is coming from. That's where your symbols is coming from. And his interpretation is based upon degrees, which we do the same thing. Excuse me. We do the same thing in Hebrew. So he just made it up, right? He was totally taught this, and he was never, he may have been a master, but that was much later. So where did it come from?
Because it's in Kirtland that he has the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have so much access to that. Now, there are some people say, well, he had friends that were. Yeah, if they were under obligation, they're not revealing a lot about that to him. And the Hebrew aspect, again, not going into Masonry, I can talk about it freely in Hebrew. The Eichbachar, okay, it's a matrix filled with Hebrew letters and numbers. The letters are numbers in Hebrew.
Right.
Okay, so if we know that, we begin to see each letter and symbol as a degree of interpretation, and it changes how we approach it. Look at his Egyptian alphabet that they were putting together. Most people in Mormonism don't know anymore that they were actually trying to recover the Adamic language. He had a team of people. I think it was William W. Phelps was one of them, who was a Mason. They used these things, and of course people say, oh, but see, they just copied it from Masonry. Well, of course, Masonry actually preserved some of these things, but they didn't originate these things. We had it before them, and somebody else had it before us.
Interesting.
So how far back did it go? Strange, you're in an Egyptian alphabet, and we as Jews say, well, this came out of Egypt. So what's going on here? And why the same levels of interpretation of these letters and numbers? So a cipher, what we're talking about, we're using this in an everyday degree or application. You had it too, but no longer. It's there in your history, but it's unknown. So somebody comes across and says, oh, see, Joseph Smith just made it up. I'm looking at him going, unless he's Wile E. Coyote super genius, it ain't happening, guys. I'm sorry. Knowledge of Hebrew, the Book of Mormon, the things that it's in there, you don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, our Christian culture, modern Christian, is a shadow of what Christianity used to be. And doesn't mean that Christianity is bad.
Right.
It just means that we're missing things.
But let's be honest, so are we.
Yes, everybody.
As members of Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I don't care how much you've read. I feel this all the time, this great dearth. And then I'll walk away from reading a book that blows my mind, and I walk away with 100 more questions than for every answer I got. I feel constantly like there's things that I don't know. And once I realize, now there's even more things I don't know, because once you know something, you realize you don't know.
Oh, yeah.
And so it just never ends.
This is my
Not to be depressing, sorry.
But then what's even worse is you realize you've been reading over it the entire time. You're going, really?
I know. By the way, that's
like at the age of 50, you're like, oh my God.
That's how I felt the first time I read Plain and Precious Things. I read your book, and I thought, I'm such an idiot. I've got to talk to Dave, because I had read the Book of Mormon a lot. And you opened my eyes to read it differently. So I say to you, thank you. That's partly why, anyway, why I'm your bestie. What am I, the chief of your fan club? But no, it's really embarrassing when you learn something and you're like, I've read it a million times. How did I not see that, right? But I guess that's part of the process.
Okay, so this is interesting, though, to circle back around. So we learn text rhythmically, right? So an example is like the Pledge of Allegiance, which you absolutely learn rhythmically. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, right? I am now many years beyond the point where the rhythm has become annoying to me because I feel like people aren't listening to the words. They're in the rhythm. They have stayed trapped in the mnemonic device, right? So I will deliberately and very stubbornly speak it as it is punctuated. Everyone around me is in the rhythm. I pledge allegiance to the flag. And I will say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America as loud as I can. So people go, oh, that's right. The line has a meaning, right? We read scriptures. We have magical skills for reading the scriptures and not understanding them.
We miss them, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a wonderful kind of ecumenism. There's a wonderful kind of insight where we can say, you know, what Alma tells us is this lost civilization, this original tree, right? These things were had from the beginning. They come from the foundation of the world. What everybody has is a broken tradition. And maybe some people have the remnants of a prior revelation. Maybe some people have a restoration that is not complete. What we all have is an incomplete or tarnished revelation, right? There's a kind of ecumenism, or there's a kind of insight that can put us into a common human enterprise, where on the one hand, okay, humility, right? On the one hand, pride's not the right word, but like, okay, I have something. I have pearls from heaven. I have wisdom, right? But I don't have everything, no matter who I am. And other people, no matter how much I might dislike them, right, also have from their tradition, right? And that can put us on a kind of a common search, a combined collective search for wisdom, which I have long thought should include, everything, all the branches of sciences, Freemasonry, every religion, every tradition. Like for me, that's the background of this whole conversation we're having. And I'm very interested in the perspective you guys are bringing.
But you know, the unique thing about Mormonism, and this is why I always push the Book of Mormon. I'm just going to be honest and flat out. If you Mormons knew exactly what you had in the Book of Mormon, you'd have a very different world. I blame you all. No, I'm just kidding. The reason I say it that way is that just the things that we've described today are things that were preserved by Masonry, just in that alone. We see this ancient knowledge, these things that change you inside and outside, to be able to see things which were both revealed and concealed. Okay. You have a book that says it contains a revelation from the beginning of the world to the end thereof. It's right in front of you. You think you just got a story of Lehi 600 BC that goes to 420 AD? Vav to Vav, I have a complete cycle. The many stories and patterns that you're given is a history. It's not just the literal story. You have a history of your world here. If you knew the patterns of the story and you're able to identify it using, like I say, many of these same keys are had in ancient Israel. I'm sure they were had even before then. You begin to see the depth and the degree of understanding. Again, which one's right? Well, they all are. I can read Lehi's story all the way down to Nephi, and it's a true story, and it's great. But that's not all that's there. You have a history of the world right in front of you. You want to know about what went on with Noah? Why aren't you checking out King Noah? You want to know about Joseph, Jacob? Why aren't you checking out Joseph and Jacob in Nephi's accounts? You want to know about, the Book of Revelation and the 24 elders that sit around the throne, yet no one ever talks about the 24 men that sit around the hill Gabor in Mormon 6.
Well, I do in Talking Scripture. Check out Talking Scripture, link in the description. We do it when we cover Mormon in the final battle of Cumorah, and we have that exact conversation. So once again, check out Talking Scripture.
There you go.
There we go. Link in the description.
So you see those patterns,
Yeah.
overarching pattern. In my perspective, this is what Joseph was, one of the reasons Joseph was able to identify those elements of Masonry to help us begin to see and do what the ancients saw and did.
Yeah. Good stuff.
It's all fractal. It's all.
Yeah, I think you blew my mind when you started. You started with fractals, and I was like, "Bro, that might be later." But that's okay.
It's so interesting. I mean, it feels like what we're saying. To go back to the earlier question, right? Like, what was Joseph thinking? It feels like Joseph is in a kind of a pre-enlightenment sort of mentality. Like, there's a mindset that is sensitive to symbol and things that are eternal and recurring more than the linear this then that then this then that, more than the sort of make a hypothesis, verify it kind of mentality of modern science, right? Which I think is super interesting.
But think about it. Over the history of Masonry, you have other institutions that identify Masonry as a challenge to both their political and religious authority.
Yep.
We're preserving knowledge and truth, light and truth, if you will, of varying disciplines. And what does education do? It liberates the people from under oppression. The idea of death to tyranny, those type of things. The reason being is because tyranny is oppression. Oppression keeps you a slave. But Masonry, as well as the gospel, is meant to liberate. So if we understand that these things are in common, then when people bring up statements like, well, I understand that the God of Freemasonry is Lucifer, and Albert Pike said so. And I'm like, start laughing. I'm going, you ever read Morals and Dogma, the entire book? You ever read his statement in context of what he's talking about? First off, he didn't quite make that statement. And second off, he's talking about something very symbolic. And he never said it was the God of Freemasonry like that. They're quoting from a Catholic, or probably a Jesuit priest, but definitely there was one that was Catholic, who went out of their way. They were trying to discredit Masonry.
Yeah.
Now, when you have this many groups try to discredit one single institution, and they do a great job of scaring the snot out of people about, oh, they worship the devil. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've done any virgin sacrifices on Thursday night or anything. I haven't met my Dark Lord on then. But I will say what is hilarious about Mormons and Masons should have more in common and more discourse, because the very things they accuse us of, the same people are accusing you guys of.
It's so good to have this conversation.
So I want to speak more on what he's talking about. But I wanted to talk really quick. So lectures in faith used to be in the doctrine.
DNC.
Yeah.
It was the doctrine part.
At the very end of it, there's a catechism.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That's the question and answer segment. And there's one part of it in particular that actually labels it as a catechism.
It's in each lesson, right? Each lesson ends with a...
At the end of each one.
Yeah.
And there's one.
What is faith?
Yeah,
Faith is this.
How do we know this? Because such and such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we... Yeah.
So for a while, we had our own catechism. I mean, we still have it. It's just in the lectures in faith. And it was expected that we'd memorize this. I have found a few historical documents that talk about some Mormon guy that, oh yeah, we were on this wagon train and we were going along with this Mormon guy, and I tried to have a conversation with him, but he was too busy working on his catechism. I really can't, I probably butchered that and it's probably awful, but yeah, we used to memorize the question and answer segment at the back of the lectures on faith. And so this stuff was everywhere. But now, on to what he was saying next, because as cool as that is...
There's something about having something memorized, though.
Yes.
There is.
Freemasonry is kind of a school for understanding the symbolic language. And nicely enough, I've been working on reading... in the language of Adam in my free time. And it's also very good at helping to school you on the basics of understanding the symbolic languages. I mean, It is its own language.
It's a tough nut to crack in the West, because in the West we have A happens, and then B happens, and then the C happens, and then the question is, well, how long were the barges? Were there really 8? How do we fit that many people in a tree? What is the length of a tree? What is the and then we get in 344 days. How is this possible? How do you cut a hole in the top? And I say to my class, I taught this in Sunday school, and I said, I don't read it that way.
Yeah.
But then I pull back the lens and say, this is a meta narrative of our journey, going through chaos, getting light from God, getting answers to prayer, and by pulling back, but that so many people want to read it very literally, and they think I'm not going to survive in a tree trunk for 344 days.
Yeah.
And I think, well, we get into Osiris put into a tree and then he comes out, or we get Isaiah's put into a tree and he ascends, and we start reading it that way and it pops for me. But in the West we have this A, B, C, how many cubits is in a foot, and we just get kind of lost because we're Westerners, and so it is a tough nut to crack.
Well, and it's hard because we're raised in that very Greek linear society. Whereas, like, for example, in Hebraic society, how many people would know that, for example, the barges have to do with language and words? That's what they're a symbol for. The hole in the top and the hole in the bottom has as a reference to the Jalabia of the high priest. There's a hole in the top and a hole in the bottom. He's drawing from these ancient statements, and this is Moroni, or whoever Mormon or Moroni is translating this, is drawing something from a different record into a Hebrew record, and we're getting that Hebrew record into an English record. And when I'm reading that, I'm going, oh, this guy's telling us a lot more here. I mean, just even the construct of the book itself, the fact that your genealogy is written in an ascended manner rather than a descending manner, should tell you something. Also, the fact of the stones themselves being touched one by one. What are the interpreter stones? Are they right in front of your eyes? Are you missing things because we're so ultra literal? And this is like you talk about the language of symbolism. Masonry preserved a language of symbolism. In Hebrew, the language of the prophetic is the language of symbol.
And I think we have, and I'm sure I'm repeating myself, but I think we have, except we have adopted, we've surrendered to sort of a unitary idea of truth. There's only one kind of truth, and it's that which is factually verifiable, right? And so we have then, I think, completely inappropriately said, okay, for me to accept the Bible or the Book of Mormon as an authoritative text, that means everything in here is factually verifiable. We deliberately restrict everything to the Peshat level, and Jonah has to have in fact gone into the belly of a fish.
Yes.
And if you don't think that he did, if you think, well, actually maybe that's something else, you're suspicious.
For our audience, the Peshat level is a literal reading instead of Remez, Darash, and what's the last one? Sod, which we'll talk about another time.
Yeah. But in what you're saying, it shows us how we are culturally deficient. And what Masonry, in my opinion, did with Joseph was to preserve those elements to enable us to have a more expanded understanding of what the scriptures were trying to say. It's no happenstance that Masonry finds much of its lore and symbols from ancient Israel and even earlier, Egypt and other things. I mean, most people don't even realize that ancient Egypt and ancient Israel were almost synonymous. They were there for 400 years. The symbols that they use are almost identical. Ancient Hebrew compared to modern Hebrew. I mean, it's interesting if you look at in the Book of Mormon that all the Hebrew that he's sounding out phonetically is archaic Hebrew, not modern. And so when you know biblical or archaic Hebrew, which is some of the oldest versions, names like Mormon, names like Marani, those type of things, Moroni, they have different meanings. And they are actual names. And they're Hebrew word constructs. So you have this entire book, and Joseph Smith's taking elements, and he's saying, I'm going to restore. I'm not going to start over. I'm going to restore using this that maintained much of this, but now, and I'm not, this isn't to replace, it's not in competition with, it is, I'm going to give you a restored ordinance that will pertain to Zion, to pertain to the reestablishment of Israel and the condition of Eden here. But understand that there's a stepping stone.
And you're referring to the endowment here in this point, yeah.
So you have the endowment here used for one purpose. Masonry, in my perspective, can be used. It gives you an idea of government. It gives you an idea of rules and order of conduct, how men can converse with one another without killing each other.
Which is always good. I'm a big fan of not killing each other. Yes.
You know?
It's interesting, like a metaphor for what Joseph might have been up to then was you might imagine that there was, like, say, a vessel that contained light and it cracked or broke and the sparks are scattered. And you might say the restoration is not that there's a whole new fire given over here. It's a process where someone is being guided to collect sparks back into and try to repair a vessel.
You mean collect branches and start bringing it back into the mother tree?
Or collect branches and bring them back into the mother tree. Yeah.
One of the cool things in our society that I think could benefit from Freemasonry is how brothers should treat each other. In other words, when we meet together, we're on equal footing. There is no one above another. You know, I may be older, may have a little bit different experience. You know, you may be younger, a little younger than me. Hopefully not by too much, but you know, and have a different experience. But the idea being is that we're able to, we're searching for the truth and the light in what the other person brings to the table.
As brothers.
Exactly.
This is really, this is so interesting to me because in one of the books, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I remember we talked about it and I brought it. It's got the black cover. There's probably 100 pages dedicated to the idea that the Republic was founded by the egalitarian idea that was a mainstay in Masonry, and that Freemasonry itself was so influential in the founding of this republic. And we came out of this culture where we have lords and dukes, and I'm cooler than you are because I inherited this land from my father. And they came to this country and said, we're gonna have a do-over. We're gonna start this new thing where we're all we're all equals. Now, granted, there's some problems with that, and I understand the concept of it wasn't 100% for everybody, but at least that was the ideal that they shot for. I think Martin Luther King called it something like the promissory note in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. This idea is coming out of Freemasonry, and they had it, and they went with it. And I think that, in my estimation, that's a little bit about what's happening in the temple. I could be sitting next to somebody who's, you know, Steve Young, right? I could be sitting next to him, but yet we're wearing the same stuff and we're brothers.
I'd like to talk more on that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Because if, like, in your last video, there was talk about, you know, there was stuff that Joseph Smith had to learn from Freemasonry. There's still, you know, I think he would have taught us more lessons from Freemasonry if he hadn't been martyred. But, like, there's still lessons to be learned, and I think the Brotherhood lesson is a big one. It's a very big one. So Joseph Smith referred to himself as the rough stone rolling, right? Knocking off all the rough edges as he's rolling down. So that's very much Masonic. Okay. So
is that a term that's used in Masonry?
Well, that's not a term that's used.
Not
in
the
Masonry,
exact, but the concept.
But that idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can find a picture of it in here really quick, but it's the idea of a rough ashlar and a smooth ashlar. And what an ashlar is it's a stone brick. You know, it's a carved stone brick. And so when
he's using that term, his audience clearly knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Right. So when he says a rough ashlar, I know exactly what he's talking about.
When he says what?
A rough ashlar. I know
rough ashlar.
Now,
okay.
Rough stone rolling. Same concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe not exact same language, but same concept.
Yeah. So if you can imagine like a rough cut block of stone.
And that's what we all are.
Yeah.
And the architect says, let's make this a better stone.
Right.
Sharper, more useful.
And that's the whole thing. It's like people will go online. They'll see exposés on Masonry thinking that, oh, they've got it down.
Yeah.
And I laugh and I'm like, it's no different than somebody trying to watch the Endowment online or somebody doing that. First off, you can watch it all day long. You can read about it all day long. But until you experience it and what the lodge is meant to bring out in you, you'll never understand.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's a Nibley line about that where he says something like, anyone who would go publish their endowment experience is in fact sharing nothing because clearly they understood nothing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So like the rough ashlar and the smooth ashlar are supposed to represent each man and Mason. So like the refining process, it's hard. You kind of got to knock off the big chunks first and slowly refine things until it's nice and smooth. And it's within the bounds. But the thing is once you've got one brick, you don't really have much until you've stacked them all together. And so one of the big symbols in Freemasonry is the trowel.
Okay.
The trowel actually, it represents Freemasonry because Freemasonry is supposed to spread the mortar of brotherhood. Okay.
Interesting.
Well,
there's some really interesting symbols on the trowel, and I don't know what you can and can't talk about, but I thought we got to at least get that on there.
There's things that I can talk about, and then there's things that I can talk about that I probably won't to keep things smoothed over.
Keep it moving. Yeah.
And then there's things that I can show you the symbol and let you connect it in your head to the temple.
So does that trowel function something like what's the term? A tracing board? Doesn't Masonry use tracing boards?
Yeah, we use
sort of a prompt in a back and forth.
Right. Yeah. You showed some. You showed some on your last video, kind of pictures of the various symbols of stuff.
Yeah.
Like the one where you were trying to show a picture of the beehive. And we can get to some of that stuff too. That stuff's pretty cool, but I want to talk more about that. I don't know if every lodge does a trowel like this.
Okay.
Yeah. I do know that Harmony Lodge, number 21 up in Cache Valley. Love you, brothers.
Go Leopards. Just kidding, they're not the Leopards.
We are really big on brotherhood up in Harmony Lodge. We're really trying to live it up to the harmony part. And we also have a lot of like little traditions that are just ours. And it's part of something that I think helps, it makes it special for us, and it helps to build the brotherhood. And like I said, the trowel of Freemasonry is spreading the mortar of brotherhood so that we can build ourselves into the cathedral of mankind. That's a wonderful allegory for Zion in my mind.
Mm-hmm. That's very section 124. If you read section 124, that language is used. This idea that we're building something. I think you and I even had this conversation about, isn't that partly what ministering is trying to accomplish in the church, to build a brotherhood?
Yeah. And so like this was one of the things that I've been noticing, and I noticed it partially because of, is it Todd McLaughlin who does the Shattering Triangles podcast?
He's one of those guys, yeah.
Yeah, so like some of the stuff that he said started blowing my mind, and with the latest update in the temple, where it seems like they're trying to drop some pretty heavy hints to us right now. And one of those big heavy hints, I actually, I got a little scripture chain that I simplified to make it easier to get at, okay? Because Freemasonry really gets at the nature of brotherhood. And in the temple, they say, you guys really got to focus. If you want to be pronounced clean like your wives are, you need to be, making yourselves clean from the blood and sins of your generation. And there's one big point. Let's see here. Where do I put this? Like in the Book of Mormon, here comes King Mosiah, and it's just like, he uses the word blood and sins of this generation, and then he talks about exactly what you need to do to get rid of it. And it's ministering. And here's kind of my scripture chain.
Tell us where you are.
So there's 4 scriptures. It's John 17:3, Mosiah 5:13, Mosiah 2:17, and John 15:9 through 15. So those are the big ones. And I think when you read them in this order, and keep in mind that 2 of those are King Benjamin. Yeah, 2 of those are King Benjamin's sermon. So keep this in mind. This is not Masonic. This is kind of my fusion of the 2, and kind of pointing something out here. So John 17:3, and this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, who thou hast sent. Now, you guys just did the King Follett discourse, so that should be fresh in everybody's mind right now. So,
except ours, we recorded it like 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, but it just got released a little bit ago.
Yeah, it just got.
Yeah.
So the next scripture, Mosiah 5:13. So For how knoweth a man the master whom he has not served, who is a stranger unto him and is far from the thoughts and intents of his heart?
So would you say the man, the master whom he has not served, that we're talking about God?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like,
Or the grand architect.
yeah,
Master.
How are we supposed, if eternal life is to know God, how are we supposed to know him unless we've served him? So Mosiah 2:17, and behold, I tell you these things that ye may learn wisdom, that ye may learn that when ye are in the service of your fellow beings, ye are only in the service of your God. So there we go. There's ministering right there. And then to wrap it all up, John 15:9-15. This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved. Sorry, I'm going to start. I'm an ugly crier.
Most men are.
Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you. Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard of my Father, I have made known unto you. So, like, this is a wonderful transformation for me. We go from servant to friend.
Yeah.
And we do that through serving one another. We're not supposed to just serve one another. We're supposed to befriend one another. It starts off with the ministering assignment, and it's supposed to come into us living out what we're supposed to live up to the fact that we call everybody brother and sister in the church.
But we're actually meaning it.
Yeah.
And our stone has been polished a little bit.
Right.
We've changed in the process.
Yeah. This is how we build Zion. Those 4 scriptures are the trowel with which we lay the mortar for building Zion. Okay. And I feel very strongly about this. Masonry, like my brothers in Masonry, I feel like they're my brothers. They've set a wonderful example for me. And you know what? We only meet like once a week to maybe practice our catechisms, and then we spend the rest of the time BSing with one another. If I were made an Elders Quorum president tomorrow, the biggest change I'd make is, hey, every Wednesday for an hour, non-committal show-up time, no assignments, no nothing, just come and make friends. That's what I'd do. And then I'd blossom out from there. Like, get to know the names of the widows in your ward. Get to know them, and then, maybe start trying to visit them sometime. It's hard. I've been trying to live up to these lessons, and modern society does not facilitate this well.
Yeah. No, modern society wants to isolate.
Oh,
Isn't that interesting?
Wants
It
to
really
plug
does.
you into the receiving tube. It wants you
But they want to make sure that you and I don't associate in a manner as which... See, here's one of the principles behind Masonry that a very old Mason once told me, my grandfather. 33rd degree Mason made a statement. He says, "You want to know," as I was asking him as a kid, I said, "Papa, what is it? What does it mean?" And he's like, "Well, you'll have to join and find out." But he says, "But I will tell you this," and I remember him saying this to me. "When you are in the presence of other men, you will become a man." And I sat there and I go, that's really, and as I got older, I realized that's true. Because men will naturally heal in the presence of other men. We can say things to each other. We can affiliate with each other. We can rub off we can chisel off the rough edges with each other. By the way, women do the same thing.
Sure.
Women with women naturally heal. Men with men naturally heal. It's a normal process. It's when people are isolated, when they feel they have no brotherhood, they have no community, or that one community is being played off another. If you can keep them divided and isolated, you can dominate them, subjugate them, and treat them like slaves.
This is almost turning into a political discourse.
Well, it's at least social. I mean, one of the depressing things about Western life for men is how many men have something approaching 0 friends.
Yeah.
And I think it is not an accident that a large number of men retire and basically die.
Yeah.
Because the only real socialization they have, the only thing that resembles friends and whatever gives them meaning is what they're getting out of work.
Yeah.
And so when you say, sorry, Bob, like it's mandatory, you're now 66 or whatever.
Here's your watch. See ya.
And if the poor guy is not prepared, like some people just die.
Yeah. And so if you look at the idea even of a quorum, most of your quorums ideas and how they used to function, it's changed a little bit over the years in Mormonism. But the idea of quorums and how they function, how we're meant to interact, straight out of Masonry. True principles are just true principles.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I have one more scripture that I want to pull up really quick.
Okay, so is this where we tell more jokes about? I'm just kidding.
No, I'll make just a little observation that upon sort of several things you said here. I mean, one of the functions of having a ritual clothing is that it creates uniformity.
Yes.
It is small d democratic, right? Everyone is wearing the same thing. And so it doesn't matter. Like I think Prince Philip was either the senior Mason in Britain or he was like right up near the top. But I presume when he went to his lodge meetings, he was basically wearing the same thing that every other brother was, right? Which is I think I think it's an important way to think about ritual clothing in Masonic texts, but also in Mormon context.
Dave, I also see it as a teaching tool.
Yeah.
If everybody's wearing the same thing, we're focused on the message, not on, wow, you have a really cool hat.
I do have a really cool hat.
Right? I really think there's something about that where we're not drawing attention to ourselves. We're just,
for sure.
What the focus is the presentation, the message.
You wear garments.
Yeah.
Okay. No secret. Everybody knows in the world that knows anything about Mormons that we have a ceremonial garment that we wear
And
under
you
our
can
clothing.
get on TikTok and see what it looks like.
Okay, check it out yourself. Here's the thing. Many traditions of Jews had the same thing. Oh, and by the way, Sephardic Jews used to wear an underlying, many still do, a white garment with interesting Hebraic symbols in them. Now, what's interesting, although they have Hebraic letters in them, take a look at your marks. They also correspond to letters of the Hebrew alphabet. What do you think you're really wearing?
And I can talk more to that in just a second because we're getting into vestments, but I want to go back to Brotherhood for just a second. So this last one, it's Doctrine and Covenants 29:13. Okay. And I'm going to just blitz through it. God is telling Joseph about, the war in heaven. And he talks about kind of Satan's sin here. And he says, and it came to pass that Adam, being tempted of the devil, for behold, the devil was before Adam, for he rebelled against me, saying, give me thine honor, which is my power. Okay. There are so many instances where, so think of it this way. Everybody has been asked to help with something, and you're able, whether truthfully or falsely, you're able to come up with an excuse. You're able to come along and say, oh, I got something that day. But then you'll have a friend, a brother, someone who you respect deeply, very deeply, and they say, I need your help. And you find babysitters for the kids. You clear your schedule. You run barefoot to them because of how much you respect them. Okay. If we want honor, if we want power in the priesthood, we need to be honorable. We need to have the brotherhood. You want to start, Christ mentioned in that last scripture, you're my friends and I have kept nothing from you. If you want to start getting answers from your prayers, to your prayers, if you want to start seeing miracles, start becoming a brother with the people in your elders' quorum. Start reaching out to the widows and orphans in your ward. Start living a brotherhood. It takes an hour a week. Choose one start in your families. Start with your families, So, but now,
in today's point, it's healing. both mentally and physically. But and as you were speaking, Josh, I just had to think, in America, at least, there's this big focus on acquiring stuff and acquiring money and security, but all that can be taken like that. But loyalty, that's priceless.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting.
Hard
I
to
was
come by
thinking,
anymore.
It's priceless, yeah.
Yeah, boy, that's true. I mean, I was thinking of this. I'm pretty sure it's in the Sefer Bahir. There's a line that says,
Okay, tell everybody what the Sefer Bahir
well, we
is.
referred to it earlier. They remember it's an ancient Jewish
go on.
mystical
Just-
text.
just wanna make
Probably
sure.
not as old as the Sefer Yetzirah, but old enough that it may contain First Temple spiritual teachings.
I'm trying to be the Paul brothers. Okay, go on.
I appreciate that. I think it's in there. There's a line that says basically you'll only be given by heaven so that you can give to others.
Yes. You receive to bestow.
You receive to bestow, which is interesting because that is also exactly what Jacob says about money.
Yes.
Right? Is that the only reason the legitimate reason to go out and get money is so that you can give it to other people.
Yeah. That's a very ancient teaching in Judaism.
Yeah.
To this day, the idea of why does God's Spirit cease to strive with us? If I seek to receive from God to bestow upon another, the Spirit then increases. If I have a brother and I'm seeking to bestow upon him and he's receiving from God to bestow upon me, the Spirit of God manifests exponentially.
Yeah.
But the moment I attempt to covet or receive to covet or murder to get gain, it stops.
Oh. Yeah.
And so now we got 2 pins that we need to come back to. So but
We're not going to make it. There's only like 15 minutes left.
Okay, so we were talking about the symbols. So interestingly enough, like I'm a big nerd for entomology. I like understanding my words and what they mean. And as I was studying things, I saw, I learned about the Gamete symbols. Mm-hmm. Am I saying that right?
You're talking about the gamma shaped.
Yeah. So
like in the ancient,
On the altar cloth.
like in the Masada and stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So I started trying to chase back the symbol gamma as far as I can, and it really goes there's a merging point where the Greek language and the Hebrew language must have split off from somewhere because gamma and it becomes very, very similar, very quickly. But the gamma symbol is super cool. And I have asked so many of my brother Masons if they know about this, and they might be trying to keep higher level secrets from me or something like that. I don't know. But it is so cool. And the uppercase gamma and lowercase gamma. And like Hebrew, they have numerical associates. So uppercase gamma is it's a square.
Yeah.
Lowercase gamma is a little squiggly.
Yep.
Yeah.
That. And the thing is,
It's true.
and they both represent the number 3, a greater 3 and a lesser 3. My brothers in Masonry know what I'm talking about if you're listening out there. There's parallels to draw from in there. And it's also the letter G. So I don't know if you can, I have my Masonic ring right there. There it is with the G. There's the square, that's the compass. It's all in one, right? And so, the letters, they're letters, and they're also on us. I get so worked up about it, I can't even talk about it. It's so exciting to see some of this stuff.
Well, it's like when you show Masonic paraphernalia to people, show it to another Mason, we understand what they mean.
Right.
You show it to the person. Oh, that's a nice ring.
Yeah.
But behind the symbolism, there's an entire history, not just a modern history, but an ancient history of the symbol. So, like when you talk about, gamma or gimel, in Hebrew. Okay, well, where do these letters come from?
And what does it have to do with a camel?
Yeah, and why is the Hebrew universe?
Why a camel?
Why is the Hebrew modern? But again, why does the Hebrew universe 22 archetypal symbols?
Yeah.
3 mothers, 7 doubles, and 12 elementals. I mean, here's the thing. It takes a knowledge of the stars to understand Hebrew. Your letters, see, this is one thing even in Hebrew. Hebrew, many of the ancient scholars will tell you, and both the elders will tell you, the language of Hebrew preserved the sounds of the Adamic language, but not the symbols.
Okay.
Okay? The symbols, obviously, I think what we have, well, and again, they're finding it now even in Egypt. It's literally, they're calling it, some friends of mine over at the university over there in Jerusalem, they're calling it Reformed Egyptian. And basically, it's distilled Hebrew symbols into a form of Egyptian demotic. And it was a language. I mean, Hebrew words in Egyptian symbols. But there was always a search, even in Hebrew, for the restoration of not only the tongue, but the writing. And this is, you see this in the Book of Mormon when Moroni tells you, we were made mighty in writing by faith, word by faith.
Right, but we are not good at writing. Yeah.
So which tells you two things.
So I want to know what you think he's saying there. Yeah. You're going to explain that?
We have words of power.
Okay.
We have sound. With others, there were words of power.
Right.
Mormons had words of power.
Right.
Had, past tense, words of power. They're in your Book of Mormon. You read over them all the time. You just don't know what you're reading. But words of power, what were they meant to be? They were in the Adamic language. Now, you're greeting them in a slightly different, you're hearing the phonetic sounding of them, but you don't have the writing.
Right.
What was lost was the writing system. This is where you get the brother of Jared. They made them mighty in writing, even to the overpowering of man in the flesh.
Right.
But why? Well, first off, these things were connected to the symbols of the stars. All of your zodiac, your Mazarot in Hebrew, your alphabet are derivations of that. So your 12 elemental letters in Hebrew are the 12 constellations of the zodiac. Your 7 double letters are your 7 visible planets from the earth. And then, of course, 3 mother letters, depends on who you talk to on this one, are 3 distinct constellations that are not in the zodiac, one of which is considered Orion, and there's 2 others. But the idea behind it is that the language of the stars, often called the language of fire, the language of angels, or the angelic tongue. So like we said in the Book of Mormon, we have this entire symbolism coming out, and they're telling you, we had this language. Okay, we were made powerful in faith by the word.
Right.
But we didn't have the writing like the brother Jared had. So he had something, that and something else. So when we're looking at this, we're reading the Book of Mormon, we read words that appear to be phonetic expressions. We don't know where they came from. So when
you're reading that verse about Moroni where he says, I'm so sad I'm not good at writing, but I'm really good at speaking.
Yeah.
He's not saying I'm not a good writer. No. He's saying something totally different in your mind.
He's saying our language is powerful because we have the sounds.
Correct.
Our writing is not theirs. Our writing system is not theirs. This is something
that's a totally different interpretation that most people don't read it that way. Yeah. And you're reading that way because of where you've been and how you see things.
Exactly. So, and Masonry played a big role in that, as well as, of course, Judaism as well. So kind of, I had the best of both worlds.
Right.
But the idea being, take a look at the Book of Mormon. It says, you enter in by the way, and then it says, after you do this, you can speak with the tongue of angels. Never knowing that the tongue of angels and stars are synonymous. Never knowing that, like Masonry, why it preserved so much astronomical and astrotheological symbols. Because it's a language. It's understanding the heavens. Why did Abraham communicate the knowledge of astronomy in the Pearl of Great Price?
Interesting, as you're saying all this, I'm thinking about modern man, and you talk about how we get isolated. Most of us live in cities where we never see the stars. We don't even know. People would say, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Go out sometime. Go out to the Antelope Island. Take us some time. Get away from the city. Go see. Just when you see the Milky Way and all the stars, you begin to see the grandeur of what these people, that was their world.
Well, also you start to see ideas mapped, right? If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, there is a region of the night sky that never changes, that includes a woman on a throne and a man on a throne and a dragon blocking the way and a path that enters and maybe a giant on the path, right? And like, that's super interesting because the Egyptians had 2 words for forever. One was jet, things that never go away, like the night sky in the north. And the other is nechech, which is things that go away and come back. They always come back, which is a description of the ecliptic of the zodiac, which can be seen as the flat plane of the earth, right? Like all of this. This is why I was so interested when you were bringing up astronomy early on, right? Is again, I think there's a lot of reason to think that most of the constellations we know are very, very old.
Yes.
right? Most, maybe it's all, but I think at least 6 of the zodiac signs go back at least to Babylon and Egypt.
And some older.
Yeah. So on the subject of Orion, I can't remember if it's Bahir or Yetzirah, but one of them talks about.
Okay, once again, for our audience.
Old Jewish texts.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doing my
Talks
job.
about- thank you. How, I can't remember what the language is, but how the tetragrammaton makes man or something like that.
For those of you at home, the tetragrammaton is
The four letters that make the name
God.
Yahweh, Jehovah,
Yod,
name
He,
of God.
Vav, He.
Yod, He, Vav, He.
Just get that out of the way.
And so the commentator draws it in a little diagram, which is sort of a Yod for the head, and then the He makes a chest, and the Vav is, I think, an arm coming out from the He, and then the second He is the
Well,
legs.
the the head is the Yud.
Yeah.
The body is the Vav.
Oh, the body's Vav.
Your upper is the upper Hay.
Yeah.
Your legs are the lower Hay.
Okay.
So when you see
Oh,
the
yeah,
brother,
that's right. So
when
the
you
Vav
see the
is
brother of Jared, and he gives you this interesting little thing of what he's seeing with the hand of God and the finger of God and
Yeah.
all these things, he's describing to you that image.
Well, so this is interesting because to me that sort of looks like an Orion outline.
Well,
But that's
and
a
even in
comment,
the
not a question, I guess.
Whether it be in the Zohar or other places, the belt of Orion was considered the gate to the temple of heaven, and which is why, even if you look at your ancient your pyramid complex, as well as even the picture of the Jerusalem temple at the time of Solomon compared to what you guys think it is modernly sitting there, and to what it really was anciently, are two different things. So the diagram that we see commonly as this little square building and stuff like that, most likely was pyramidal in shape, not rectangular in shape like
Interesting.
we think. Now the other could the one fit in the other, but not necessarily the way we think.
As a box.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
a container.
Okay, so here's the thing.
Okay. Now wrap it up.
Yeah,
Go
we could keep this up for hours. I have so many things and so many conversations I want to have, but for the
I
sake
dare
of
you to summarize.
yeah, for the sake of everyone's sanity, I'm going to throw out a couple things, but I want you to think about a couple concluding statements maybe that you could make to close us out. But big picture, what I'm hearing today is yes, Freemasonry played a role in the Republic. It played a role in setting up a way for the early saints to be prepared for the endowment. It is another way. I'm hearing you say, you're coming from this perspective of saying to me, Mike, by the fact that I can wear this Freemasonry hat and I can wear the hat of being an endowed member of the temple, I see things differently. And many of us don't know what we don't know. How many hats, because we're limited here living on earth with this mortal time frame that we're in, we're limited by how many hats we can wear. You can only learn so much. We have to earn money to eat. And so that's why I love this format where we can have somebody come on who can share things that I'll never get a chance to learn. I have too many other hats I want to put on. But you've come today and shared your time with me with us. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to come and talk with us today. What's one maybe concluding remark that you would want to share to make sure that we don't miss as we've had this conversation? Josh, I'll start with you, and Rob will end with your comment.
We've just scratched the surface.
Right.
Like, we could do another 4 hours easy peasy. It has helped me to see the temple in a more symbolic light, and it has helped me to kind of digest it better.
Yeah. Which we can all do better. I think
Right.
we can all as Latter-day Saints know that there's stuff we don't know, and let's improve. Let's get better at understanding it. And how can we do that? Well, this is one way.
So Freemasonry has been a absolute good for me in my life. I cannot guarantee that it will be an absolute good for everybody. And so, which is why, if you want to be a Mason, one of the things they make sure is that you are not influenced by some type of outside influencer getting you into it. Like, you can't have somebody saying, hey, buddy, you should join Masonry. You should join Mason. That's not what we're about. You're joining Masonry solely because you have a positive opinion about it.
Okay.
But don't you have to get in? Not to disagree with that. Is it not also the case that you basically have to be invited, or do you go?
No, you have to ask.
You have to ask. Oh, interesting.
Yep.
Oh, I had that back.
That's an interesting principle.
I felt left out all this time, but it was me.
Yeah, you have to ask. It helps if you know somebody who is already a Mason. You can ask them, and they'll get you started on the process. If you don't know anyone who's a Mason, you can contact. Do a Google search for your local lodge. Contact. You'll find the lodge website. You'll be able to get in contact with the lodge secretary. He'll tell you a time and place where you can go to a lodge You can ask questions, catch a free meal with some of the Masons, you know, and you can start developing your own opinion on Freemasonry at that point, and you can decide whether it is for you or not.
Okay.
And
plus, you know, take time. Oftentimes, if you're outside of Utah, many of the Masonic lodges or Masonic temples have open houses.
Okay.
They'll put it up on their websites, whatnot. If you're here in Salt Lake, they have tours of the Salt Lake Masonic Temple. It's worth the time.
It's pretty cool.
I promise you, no one will sacrifice you. It's not going to happen.
Don't go on Thursday night.
Just don't go on Thursday nights. Yeah, no. But no, it's
Is that when it is? Thursday
That's
night?
what I've been hearing. Also, don't be a virgin.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
There you go.
You're pretty much good after that.
That's what I heard.
You know,
My two lessons.
But go down,
Yeah,
and
check
they'll
it out.
take you a tour. I mean, the architecture of the structure is amazing. The interior artwork, the symbolism that you will visibly see. You'll see many different types of Masonic design of lodge rooms open to the public. If you go on the days that they give the tours or schedule one, they'll be happy to. And these guys can give you some amazing insight into the history of the building, what they're doing there, why they do what they do. So
this doesn't have to be the end of the conversation.
No.
What you're saying is there's more information available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if the idea of Masonry, what is it? Well, there's fraternal Masonry, which is operative. You're going to have your nuts and bolts. Then there's speculative Masonry, which is going to get to your legend and lore. Now, the question is, what did Joseph Smith had? He had both. And his mindset in employing those elements of Masonry into the Restoration make a lot of sense, both from definitely a Masonic point of view. And the only people who are going to have a problem are those people who are so uneducated, so naive to believe that they think they know all about it and yet have never experienced it. And I'm here to tell you, if anybody ever tells you that we worship Satan or that we're Luciferian, they are liars. They are flat out not good people and need to do their homework. It does not occur. People in Masonry do not do that.
And I'd like to second that. There's a very clear outline of what the secret combinations are in the Book of Mormon. And Freemasonry does not fit the secret combinations by a long shot.
Yeah.
And I have more to say about that, but man, I've learned some cool things in my scriptures study recently, and there's not enough time to talk about it. But
That's good. That's a good parting shot. Dave, do you have anything you want to say before we sign off today?
No, thank you both. Really appreciate you both coming out. It's been educational, very interesting.
Yeah, you guys are awesome to share your expertise. We thank you so much for giving your time today. And to our audience, I hope this was useful to you in your studies. And I love the invitation. If you're curious, go down and check out your local lodge and ask for a tour. And with that, as always, stay curious and hungry. Mm-hmm. Did I do okay as Hayden?
Great.
I tried to be Hayden.
Great.